So we're excited to have you here. Hopefully you're ready to be inspired and all of that. No pressure. But I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker. My name is Dr. Charlie Andrews, and I'm the Assistant Vice President for Academic and Career Success, which is a new unit here at the university. And I have the pleasure of working with Valerie very closely on many initiatives. So she graciously asked me, and I'm very honored to be able to introduce to you our common reading author and speaker for today. Jim St Germain, he is an author, social entrepreneur, and compelling motivational speaker. He's the co-founder of Preparing Leaders of Tomorrow, a nonprofit organization that provides mentoring to at-risk and formerly incarcerated youth. He's also a board member with the National Juvenile Detention Center, a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting justice for all children by ensuring excellence in juvenile defense. Jim works as a residential care advocate for the city of New York and was appointed by President Barack Obama to the Coordinating Council on Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. Early in his career, Jim worked as a youth care counselor at the same Boys Town Juvenile Detention Center in New York City, where he was once a resident. Additionally, he worked as an advocate for young people living with mental health issues at the Mental Health Association. Jim also served on the Youth Advisory Council of New York State's Division of Criminal Justice Services. His passion for public service comes from his life experiences, which are detailed in his memoir, A Stone of Hope, which, as you all know, was the selection for this year's Common Reading at FIU. Today, we have the chance to listen to Jim as he tells his story of moving from Haiti to New York and all of the challenges that he faced. It's my pleasure on behalf of the FIU family and community to welcome him. So please join me in welcoming Jim to the stage. Thank you. Yes. Oh, okay. Okay.
Morning. Oh, it's afternoon. Sorry. Thank you so much for this gracious introduction. Thank you guys for having me here at FIU. I sincerely apologize. I was late. I usually don't drive back home in New York City, and driving here, you always have to get on the highway, and it's pretty scary for me. So I'm a very careful driver. But I'm here, and I'm grateful. Thank you, Valerie, for all that you've done to bring me on campus. Most importantly, I want to extend a really deep gratitude to many of the students who wrote letters to me and messages and emails, either through social media or other platforms, telling me about the book and how they've read it and what it means to them. I'm standing here partly because of 3 books I read, which I detailed in the memoir. The first was a book called The Pack, and what I gathered from The Pack was that despite your challenges and obstacles and the battles which some of us come into this world to, which we don't get to pick, you can still find a way to fight through it and make it out. And the second book I read was The Autograph of Malcolm X, which really, really, really changed my life for the better. In Malcolm, I gained the very same thing. A young man who was born in Omaha, Nebraska, and escaped all sorts of vicious white supremacist act, leaving Omaha for Detroit, and from Detroit to Boston with his sister, and then from Boston to New York City, and then being caught up in a life of crime himself, and then decided that he was going to use his passion and anger and purpose for a greater cause, which is the cause of fighting for marginalized people. And the third was Dreams from My Father. I remember reading Dreams from My Father, and the guy's name at the time, who I ended up working for, sounded really foreign. He was a junior senator from Illinois at the time, and he had not had his name recognition yet. And I remember reading about his journey also and what it meant for me. And the common thread in these three books were that there were people who were given certain circumstances and determined to use it for the greater good, and that they were going to live these experiences, but actually put them out into the world and try to make a difference, which is what I believe we are all here for. So to backtrack a little bit, as many of you know, I was born in Haiti. I was born to a really angry father. Dad was unemployed, and he was addicted to drugs and alcohol, and so as kids, my siblings and I, we've seen a lot, we've experienced a lot. I remember questioning even the existence of God. Like, man, if there's a God, how come we have to go through all of the pain and suffering and the hunger and the lack of health care and food and all of the things that we have to deal with? And not having my mother around for that journey made life that much more challenging. And as a child, you don't have the capacity, the mental capacity of fortitude or the understanding to make sense of the world. All you can do is make sense of what's in front of you and what you have to deal with. And so the way I reacted to that was to be as angry and as ferocious in pursuing whatever means that I thought was available to me to survive. I believe that kids do what they know and they adapt to their surroundings. And so I did just that as a child in Haiti. But one thing that I saw as a promise whenever I had a chance to watch TV was this thing called America. And one movie in particular that I really love as a kid, I know if many of you in here as freshmen have seen it, it's called Home Alone with Kevin. And I remember particularly that I was really, really moved by Kevin's house. This $2 million mansion on the west side of Chicago. And I would get into these arguments with my brother, and we would say, man, can you believe that, from this level of poverty and the pain and the things that we've dealt with as children? Now all we have to do is argue about, how do we keep Joe Pesci out of our mansion once we move to the States? And so when we were fortunate enough to get our visas to move to the States, that's the life I was expecting. And when I got to Brooklyn, New York, at the age of 11, the world that I encountered did not make sense to me. It wasn't the world that I saw on TV. So Hollywood did a really great job portraying this one world for me. And if you're from another country, you kind of probably know what I'm talking about a bit, especially prior to social media. And so I quickly realized that in this new environment, despite the promises that were made, and those promises are very real for people, I think they're more tangible for some people than others, as we know. I still had to figure out my way in that world. And again, as I sort of accustomed to doing, I did not figure it out fast enough. So I got involved in the streets as a young man. I realized that growing up in Brooklyn, New York, with the level of poverty and violence and broken homes and broken schools, that your number one asset, at least in my mind as a kid, was to be as imposing, as violent, and as intimidating as anyone else around you. That was your cachet. That's how you survive. And for people who are not from that world, it doesn't always make sense. And so the way I try to make the analogy is like I say, you think of the United States. One of the reasons why we're a world power is because we have the biggest guns on the block. And so when you think of growing up in the environments which I grew up in, if you break that down to however violent you are, how confrontational you are, how physical you are, then allows you to survive and thrive within that environment, but eventually will be the cause of your demise at some point, because it's inevitable. So I went into the streets. My grandmother at the time, she was the most beautiful, the most gracious woman ever, but she couldn't keep up with a 15, 14-year-old boy who was just trying to make sense of a world which she barely understood herself. And so it just led me deeper and deeper into the streets. And at some point, I realized I had to make a decision that if I was going to stay in this world, if I was going to stay selling drugs, becoming a product of the environment that I was in, that the consequences would be deadly. Because I've recognized that most of my friends who were a bit ahead of me in the game, that's where they were heading. And I would be dishonest to say that when I recognized that I made the right decision. As you guys know, I'm sure many of you read the book, you were cursing at me like, geez, when is this kid going to get it? And so what bring about changes at the time for me was actually getting in trouble with the law over and over and over and over again. And I don't know if we have any Haitians in this audience, but in a Haitian household, there's a point where it doesn't matter your age, what you've done. If you make your bed, you'll lay in it and by yourself. So my parents, my grandmother, God bless her, she pretty much said, you know what? I don't care, you're 14 years old, you're going to have to figure this world out on your own. And though I thought I knew it all, because as kids, you think you know it all. I'm sure the freshman in here knows it, everything. I had to go into this world that I was not so familiar with, that I was really afraid of, but I couldn't show it. I knew that if I showed the fear and the vulnerability, that, again, I wouldn't survive. So I would hide it. And when you hide these kind of painful experiences, when you hide your pain and the things that you're afraid of, it's going to come out somehow, some way. So it came out in a sense of anger, again, fighting over and over, carrying weapons as a young man. But somehow I was fortunate enough to just always turn this corner as things were getting worse and worse and worse. And so when I got into the juvenile justice system finally, I remember the judge, who I am actually really close friends with now, she said to me, you know, I think that you are a danger to not just yourself, but the community which you live in. And I didn't really understand what she meant at the time. So she sentenced me to a year. And that year turned into 2 years. And interestingly enough, at the end of the second year, I decided that I was going to ask the judge to extend my time, which my attorneys, who are like family now, looked at me and thought I was crazy. Said, why the heck would you want to stay in this system for a longer period of time? And what I realized was the phone calls that I was getting from back home, of the friends dying, the friends going to prisons, the friends that were still in the streets doing all the things that I was, in a sense, trying to escape from, those things weren't changing. The neighborhood was not changing enough with my pace, keeping up with my pace. So I thought that, man, maybe if I can just stretch this out and do another year here where I can grow and mature, where I can perhaps invest in an education, where I can be exposed to a different world, then maybe that would work out well for me. And so I made that decision. And it doesn't always pan out for most people like it did for me, but it worked out pretty well. So I ended up finishing school while I was in the system. I then enrolled in college. I was one of the first kids to actually go to college in New York State while I was still in the juvenile justice system. So it was kind of interesting. I would be in class with students from the outside world. It's the same way you guys go to class. Imagine a kid who is locked up in this facility coming to class with you for the first time. And I got to college also in a really interesting way. I remember the lady who worked with me in the facility, her name was Issa Sedano. She's just responsible for the man that I am today. One day she was studying in the living room, and I said to her, why are you studying? She said, well, I'm in college. I said, what is college? I was about 17 at the time. It never registered to me what college was. And she said, well, it's a place. She was really clever. She said to me, it's a place you go to. If you're poor, the government may even help you pay for it, and you'll be outnumbered by beautiful young women. And I said, sign me up. How do I sign up for that? And so the next day, she would take me to class with her. She would just take me to the campus, and I would just walk around. And I remember being just amazed at that world and just seeing people going about the business and people being studious and just being independent. The environment felt good. It felt different. It felt safer than anything I was accustomed to. And I said to myself, man, I want to be a part of this. And so back in New York City, our campuses are usually not as pretty and gorgeous and clean, and we don't have lakes and all the nice stuff you guys have outside. But nonetheless, coming from where I came from, it was still very much a different world for me. And I wanted that world. I wanted to pursue it. I wanted to explore it. I felt inadequate at time being in that world, having not had the level of education many of my peers had. But I knew that hard work and determination and the hunger that I had, and the fact that in a sense I was playing with house money, that being in college for me was not expected. It was something that happened by some sort of divine intervention, I would say. And so I've always looked at myself and said, you know what? What do I have to lose? I can just give this my all. I can work as hard as possible. I may not be able to formulate a sentence as properly as some of my peers, but if I work hard, if I sit in the front row, which I did throughout my entire college career, I would sit in the front row. I made sure that all my professors knew my name. I was the kid who was always, if you're a professor here, I was the kid who was always in your class, in your office during office hours. I realized that what you know is as important as the relationships you have with people, and that people respect effort, and that if I was putting in the effort, my professors would understand, and that they would go out of their way to ensure that I understand something that I was struggling with. And so that journey worked out just that way for me. And from BMCC, I ended up going to John Jay College. And at John Jay was really where my life kind of changed. For the first time, I realized that the level of poverty and economic violence and violence itself, a lot of the things that plague many communities throughout this country weren't some sort of natural phenomena. That these things were created over hundreds of years by policies and people who did not want to see individuals like myself, young, black, or brown, be successful. And so my inclination was that I wanted to change that. I wanted to be a part of the solution. And I realized that in the past, as a young man, I had been a part of the problem, right? Whether I knew it or not, I had been a part of the problem plaguing my own community. So I said, if I have the life experience, the education combined, then maybe I can go back into the world where I came from and try to pull somebody else back up with me. And so that's what I've done ever since. And I wrote this book hoping that the pain, the beauty, resiliency, my vision for the swirl in this country would make it into somebody's living room, bedroom, bookshelf, a library, and that students and young people and adults alike who are interested in helping marginalized kids do well would take something from it. And so I've been really touched by the response that I got from many of the students here. My Instagram following even went up. A lot of your freshmen are following me, so I'm always careful not to post anything that would get me in trouble. But most importantly, I've been able to turn that pain into purpose, which I believe all of us, regardless of who we are, we can do that, right? It doesn't matter if you grew up completely differently than I did with a lot of things available to you. We all experience struggles somehow, some way. And so what we do with that struggle, to me, it's what matters more than the struggle itself that we've experienced. So there's a young man here, I'm going to call him out. He wrote me might have been 3 months ago, he sent me a really profound and touching note. After he read the book, he told me it was the first book he read, and what it meant to him, and how much he felt connected to me. And so we've been communicating back and forth for months now. Last night we actually went out to dinner, and I told him, Valerie told me I should probably have a slide, but I'm really bad with technology. He said to me, man, don't worry about it. I got you. I'll put together a slide for you. This kid, Josh, in the back sitting at the laptop. And, just being with him last night, having dinner and talking, communicating with him over the last few months. He's been writing, and he would send some stuff to me, and I'll read it, trying to give him some feedback. It's truly a culmination of what I want my life to be about. And that's on a personal level. And I'm not sure he understands how much he's meant to me in this process. And I probably gained more than I've given during our back and forth so far. But this is what my life and this book has been about, is trying to not have all the answers and not speak for every young black or brown person in this country, which I try to be really explicit about that in this book, is that this is my journey, and many people may be able to relate to it, but I am not speaking for every young person. And so Josh is going to help me real quick with my technologically impaired self, to show you a little bit of my life. So this is myself and my siblings. Which one do you think is Jim St. Germain? Red, yeah. The angry one. So it's us in Haiti. This is actually the house I was born in and I grew up in as a kid. Actually, we still have that same house. When I go back to Haiti, I still go there. This is our kitchen. We're working on changing that. But yeah, this was my house as a child in Haiti I was born in. This is my favorite role model. I figure it would be good to share with you guys. This is Malcolm X. Yeah, I love Malcolm. I think he motivates me a lot. I think that as a young man, particularly being black and brown in this country, life is difficult, especially in these times, but we can argue in all times. So I find it really important that I draw up on my ancestors to give me strength when I feel like moving out of this country, which I feel like literally every day. So, yeah. It's my favorite artist. I think it's important. This is Nas. Nas is a lyricist, one of the greatest artists ever lived. I know some of you may be like, I don't listen to rap. This guy's one of the smartest human beings there is. Fun fact about Nas is that he was born in Brooklyn. A lot of people don't know that. His father was a jazz musician, and his mother was a teacher, so he's a really brilliant guy. He's older now. He's like 45. As a kid in Boys Town, I remember going to my first basketball game. And I have that picture up there because it was an important thing. Because I think I was about 17 here, maybe 18. I was just about to leave the program. I don't wear headbands anymore, as you can tell. And exposure to me is a big part of our transformation. Kids do what they know. Kids cannot do what they can't see. They can't be what they can't see. So going to this basketball game at the time, I think meant a lot for me because it showed me that maybe this is something I want more of. And the way to do it is to continue working hard and maybe become a tenured professor and can go to more basketball games. This is me. You can't really see me, but again, this is the block where I grew up in as a young man. I used to act like I was very tough, but inside I was really tender. This is the building where I grew up in. Doesn't look like Kevin's house. And these are some of the youngsters. And I remember them when they were like really like 5, 6 years old. Now many of them are in their teens. And it's interesting to see the cycle continues. And so what I try to do a lot is be that big brother for them. I'm always bothering them. I'm like the annoying guy on the block who's always telling them maybe they want to try it this way. And the beautiful thing about it is that they know I'm coming from a very genuine place. I don't come at them from a standpoint of judgment, but it's more like I've been there, I've walked these streets, I've walked these paths, and here's what works for me, and maybe it'll work for you. So I'm always hanging out with them here and there when I'm not at FIU. This is my son. Yeah, it's my son Caleb. He's 5 now, and he means the world to me. So I smile every time I see him. This is him again at the bottom. This guy, his name is Carlos Walton. He was the dean in my junior high school. He's a very special man. I like to say that he is responsible for closing more funeral homes in my neighborhood than any single person I know. He is the guy that loved those of us nobody else wanted to love. Just a really special and selfless man that I am indebted to in so many ways. He's pretty much a father to me. He was the first man who ever told me he loved me. And I remember feeling awkward when he said that to me. And now we just tell each other we love each other all the time. It's kind of weird. I founded a nonprofit organization, as many of you know. These are some of the mentees and board members and families that we work with on a regular basis. Not all of them, just a few of them. And that's my son all the way at the end. And this is me right above him. Plot means a lot to me because what really changed my life, I believe, was strangers taking interest in me. When I wrote about these 2 strangers, one of them was a guy named Marty Feynman, and I'll never forget our first encounter. This guy walked in the room, like a shaggy hair and a little earring on, and he's like, "Look, kid, me and you have nothing in common. I'm a old, rich Jewish guy, and I don't know what it's like to be you. I grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth, but here's what I want to do to help you." And I remember really, really being touched by that, because a lot of times as a young man going through a lot of my trials and tribulation, adults who meant well would say to you, "I know what you're going through," and a lot of times I was like, "You don't know what I'm going through." And so the fact that Marty flipped it on me, he changed it. He just kept it real with me, as we call it. Many of the freshmen, they call it. He kept it real with me. He told me who he was. He told me that we don't have many things in common. He told me that this country and this world and this society is completely different for him than it is for me. But he is willing to help me if I can meet him halfway. And to me, that was really profound. And again, I don't make a decision now without actually reaching out to him. He means the world to me. And he was a mentor that came into my life. He was my attorney. And so when I was thinking back in terms of what are some of the most impactful things I can do to reach young people, I realized that a mentorship program would be it. That there are hundreds of thousands of young people in this country who literally do not have access to a positive role model, a caring adult. And they're going about it in the world and just trying to figure things out on their own, from TV, from social media, from friends. And then we as adults, sometimes we judge them. We say they're knuckleheads and they're this, they're that. But sometimes we don't reach out to them. We don't fight through them. And that's what happened for me. A lot of people kept fighting with me. So Plot is very close to my heart because that's what we tried to provide for a lot of the young people back home in Brooklyn. Wait, what's that? That was me breathing? One of the things I do, and it's my favorite things to do, is to go into junior high schools and high schools and speak to kids. I love kids. I've always loved kids, and I really love communicating with them. And this was a while ago. This was about 8 years ago. So many of these youngsters are in college now. One of them I am still very close with. The others, I don't really know exactly what they're up to, but I hope they're doing well. I don't know if I would remember them if I see them. This was the first time I've ever spoken public, and I wrote about this experience also in the book. It was a benefit for Boys Town, the program that I was in. Boys Town actually has home here in Florida. Just thinking about it, I think in Tallahassee or somewhere. Yeah, and I need a little bit more light there. You can't really see me, but you see the teeth at least. And this is actually I thought it would be fun to put this up there. This is one of my closest friends. You guys probably recognize him from the Facebook movie. His name is Jesse Eisenberg. We're actually working on a project now together. So he's a little quirky, smart, weird guy, but he's really good, really nice. This was the first time I ever testified in Congress. I've done it 3 times since then. Testified in the House of Representatives. There was a bill. It was called the Better Option for Kids Act. Pretty much the goal of this legislation was to remove money from the prison industrial complex towards community-based programs, education, job training, things that we know actually work rather than incarceration. Sadly, the bill failed in the Senate. It was my first taste with politics. I also wrote about this moment in the book, and I remember feeling really bitter and felt betrayed. I couldn't understand that there are people in this country that do not want to see young people thrive. I can't make sense of that. So, but it was a great learning experience since then. Yeah. I also wrote about this a bit, but I was one of the individuals on the president's task force. We worked on the last president, to be clear. We worked on police and community relations, and a big part of this task force was created by the unfortunate murder of Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown and so many others. We did some meaningful work, but a lot of things are being turned back. So it was a pretty big moment in my life because I know the consequence of a police interaction with a young black man. I feel it all the time. And that's an experience only we truly deal with on a regular basis. My white friends don't think about dying when they have encounters with the police, so that was a very meaningful moment trying to be a part of the solution again. Oh, I wanted to share this with you guys. I think sometime I'm a model. Social media have done that to a lot of us. I'm sure, Valerie, you can relate. I just thought it would be cool to show. This was my first trip back to Haiti after about 15 years. It was really, really tough to be back there, to see what the world was like, and to see some of the people who were there for me as a child. So that was a meaningful moment. This is my mother, and this picture was taken in July. I am 29 now, and I'll be 30 soon. And this was the first time her and I had a conversation where I learned about her and her life. It was, again, another really profound and painful journey. But I thought it was a part of the healing process because as an adult now, I'm realizing how much growing up without a mother still impacts me today in every facet, in relationships and just emotionally, as it relates to being a father. Sometimes my son asks me about his grandmother, and to watch the relationship he has with his mother is the most beautiful thing ever. But in a sense, I can't really relate to him on that level. Yesterday, his mother said he packed her lunch and put some special things in there for her. And he's 5 years old, so I texted back and said, well, he's already a better man than me. And I think, part of that, a lot of it comes from that special thing you get from your mother, which I don't care how amazing you are as a dad, you just sometimes, at least for me in my personal experience, is not always something you can gain anywhere else. So that was meaningful. We did more work with the last administration. One of the things we focused on was the school-to-prison pipeline, which obviously are connected to everything else in this country. For example, we know that a black child who's 5 years old is 3 times more likely to be suspended, 5, than a white child for the same exact behavior. It could be like throwing a pencil, whatever it is. These are real statistics and real data. I don't know if you guys remember a few years ago the incident in, I think, South Carolina where that police officer slammed that girl in the classroom. That was when we went and tried to figure out some solutions on how we can break the school-to-prison pipeline. This was my first time in Europe. I was in London, and a close friend of mine runs this law firm in London, so we did a book talk there. And then I ended up in Paris of the day of the World Cup finals. So I watched it in Paris. It's really special. And then I went to Rome. It was a really interesting journey to see what different criminal justice systems looks like across the pond. Oh, this was in Paris. This bookstore belongs to me. I'm kidding. There's a town in Paris called St Germain. It was really funny and interesting being there. I walked around St Germain for 3 hours just to see my name over and over again in the buildings. I wrote and directed my first short film. I've been writing screenplays. What I've realized over the years is that the best way to connect with people, especially people perhaps who may not have the experiences that we've had, is through storytelling. Storytelling has always been a powerful method to change people's hearts and minds, and to reach out to them in a way that we may not be able to do in other ways. So I figure the way I'm telling a story now, that I can perhaps put some of it on the screen and tell some of the stories that I think need to be heard, and whether it's stories about the Me Too movement or education, whatever it may be. So that's one of my new endeavors that I've been working on. And so our first film was just submitted to a lot of film festivals, and we're hoping to be able to expand that. I think that's my time. The last picture I think was important. I was actually in Little Haiti yesterday. I went to find some Haitian food. Yes, and you guys have, as many of you know, have a really important election coming up. I am not one to believe in how to tell people to vote, but I do believe that we all should vote. So particularly the freshmen in there who are probably able to vote for the first time, I highly encourage you to do your research. Don't just vote for anyone, because that's the letters next to the name. I believe the process is that we need to learn about people, regardless of what letters they have next to their name, and then make an informed decision. I think it's a privilege to vote. My ancestors were lynched, decapitated, killed, bombed, shot, everything you can possibly think of when they were trying to vote. And so it's something that's really, really important and deeply profound for me. And I think that the powers that be love it when you do not vote. So therefore, it's crucial that you guys vote. It's just really, really important. A democracy relies on it. So that's it. So thank you guys very much. I truly appreciate being here. You taking some questions? Yeah. And I absolutely love questions. And no question is tough enough for me. You can literally ask anything you want. I would particularly encourage the students here to ask some questions. So please feel free to ask any question you want. Or else I'm going to pick on you. Oh, there's one.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, okay. Sorry, I'm Lito. So thank you so much for being here and for writing your book. Very
What's
inspirational.
your name?
It's Gabriella.
Gabriella.
And I'm with some of my colleagues who are SLS teachers. So we teach the first year experience class. So we make sure they read your book.
Beautiful.
So my question for you is, I've heard about the gentrification that's happening in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
What do you think about that and
Yeah.
just your
Yeah.
opinions?
So it's actually really personal. I lost my apartment that I grew up in to gentrification. Literally overnight, apartment was gutted out. My neighborhood's completely different than what it used to be now. I actually remember a few years ago, about 8 years ago, one of my friends who lives in Park Slope, predominantly wealthy white area, and we were on the train, and there was a stop. It's called Grand Army Plaza, where usually you'll see all of the people who are white will get off that train stop. And I said to her, have you ever gone past this stop? She said to me, no, my parents say that, I shouldn't go past this stop. And this was just about 8 years ago, and now that has completely changed. And I am a huge proponent of diversity and change. I think people need to mingle with each other. I think one of the biggest problems we have in this country till this day is segregation. Segregation by choice, segregation by school systems. We're afraid of people who don't look like us. I actually read a study recently where it say that 75% of white Americans do not know a person of color. I don't know how accurate that is, but it's from CNN. And to me, that is painful. And I think that makes sense in terms of the moment we find ourselves in now. I think it's harder to hate people once you know them, once you spend time with them and learn about them. So with all that being said, I love change. I love mixing things up. But I think also gentrification in a capitalist society, it comes with an avalanche of new money. And usually those who stayed in that community forever and they dealt with everything the community had to offer in terms of the bad things now can't enjoy the new economic boom because a lot of these people don't own property. So they're being pushed out. So our homeless rate in New York City is rising when it has ever been. We have about 65,000 homeless people now, and about 40,000 of them are children. Meanwhile, we have hundreds of empty penthouses all over the borough. So it's a tragedy in so many ways. It's just another wave of oppression. But some of the new friends moving into the neighborhood, I know them, I like them, and they can't afford to move into the neighborhood. They would move in 10 years ago. So it's a really strange dichotomy, and I don't really know the answer for it. And obviously, politically, in terms of policies, we can do some things, but as you know better than most, money runs the entire system. So the developers and those with the wallets get to have the last words. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I think that, there's another question.
Hello.
Hi. How are you?
My name is Sherman. Oh, I'm sorry. Hello, my name is Sherman Brown. My question is for you. For individuals who see you and see your story and they want to make a change, but they feel like, I can't do something that Jim did. I
Right.
don't know how to get started, where to get started. What advice can you give to us all for those who want to make a change, who want to do something great that you did and you are doing? What
Right.
advice can you give to us all?
Thank you. Great question. I'll tell you this. I still doubt myself every day, literally. And you just wouldn't be able to tell. But every day I wake up, I'm like, man, can I do this? Are they going to think I'm some sort of imposter being on the stage? Like, because doubt is part of being human. Like, we all go through it. But I think the difference for me is that I don't have an option. I've always viewed myself as not having an option but to do these things. So for some people, this work is activism. For me, it's survival. My life depends on a better America. That's not the reality for a lot of people. My life is better if the police behaves better. My life is better if the school system is better. My life is better if the prison system is better. My life is better if there is less guns. My life is better if the planes are safer. That's how I view the work that I do in the politics of my life. And so I get up and just go about it. And, you know, sometimes we always look at things as trying to do these big things all the time. But there's so many little small moments that had led me to where I am today. I like to use baseball as an analogy. Most baseball games aren't won by home runs. It's usually a little hit, little bunt, little something that gets you to the next base. Same thing with football, right? I know you guys love football in Florida. You know, it's just the yards, the 4th and 1, the little things you do. I was talking to Josh about this yesterday. It's about what's the next thing. And just to do that thing. And sometimes that thing may just be you being nice to another person, or you helping an elderly person with a grocery bag, or you holding the door for someone. And maybe that person may want to turn around and give you another opportunity. And then there's a snowball effect that happens there. And so that's what it has been for me. None of this happened overnight. You know, it's always been a little thing here and there. I believe in gratitude. I think the number one gift that I have is that I've always shown appreciation to people for every small thing. I know that nothing is given coming from the world where I come from. I know that I don't deserve anything. And that when people go out of their way for you, you show them as much appreciation as possible. And in turn, those people want to do more for you. They want to give you more opportunities. And my entire life has been about that. I think for me, this book, truly, if you ask me what this book is about, it's about people coming together and not giving up on me. It has nothing to do with me. I don't think I have any special gift that any other child out there in the world do not possess. I think that for me, I just keep getting lucky and just keep meeting people who just wanted to see me succeed. And so, I'm sorry, that's a really long-winded answer to tell you that. No, it's not a sexy answer, but it's really the real, it's the real answer. I remember when I first started as a freshman. I was just a freshman with no one in my family had been to college. It wasn't from a neighborhood where I was hanging out with college students. But then I kept trying. I did one thing here. I write one paper. I failed this math test, but I tried again. I kept on taking it. And then things started to get better and better as we go. So for every young person in here or anyone who's trying to use their agency to bring about changes in the world, I would say to just take it slow. And when you're young, you think that you're like, man, I don't have any time. Like I got to do this right now. Instant gratification is a big thing for us as young people. But what you realize is that, things happen when you make them happen, but things also happen when they're supposed to happen. So, yeah, thank you. I'm trying to keep my answers short. I'm sorry. How am I doing with time, Valerie? Good, thanks.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
My name is Andrea,
Hi,
and I'm from
Andrea.
Dominican Republic, so
Hi,
neighbors.
hola.
Yes. So when I read the first paragraph,
My mother
I'm like,
lives in
okay.
DR now, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Awesome. So when I read the first paragraph, I'm like, okay, he's talking to me, because I went through the same thing, so I have to keep reading. So thank you for being here. What's next for you? I heard you saying about writing, screenwriting,
Yeah.
Politics, you have your nonprofit.
Yeah.
So what do you see yourself, maybe I'm a recruiter too, so maybe 5 to 10 years from now?
Yeah.
What can we say about Jim?
That's a intimidating question. You know, again, so right now, as I mentioned earlier, I think that I don't think I have too many talents, but one of the talents I have is that I actually like people. You know, some people don't like people. I like human beings. I literally love people. I don't care where they are, where they're from. I want to talk to them. I want to learn from them. And I think one way to do that is through storytelling. So I want to continue writing as much as possible. One of the things I'm currently working on is actually, this book is being represented by WME, and we're in talks to have it to become a film. So there's a lot of meetings happening with that. So I'm focusing on that at the moment. But to be quite honest, I am always flexible to what the world brings me sometime.
So are you going to use that platform or storytelling to give opportunities to those kids that probably are in the same situation that you were?
Definitely.
Okay.
Every opportunity I get, every room I get to be in, I try to be mindful of why I'm there. Not the fact that I'm there, but why I'm there. I know I'm there for those youngsters that I used to be, that I'm still very close to now. And so that's always what I'm looking for, is to connect those bridges, you know, to see what is it that FIU is doing and how can I connect someone from Opelika or wherever to a program that's at FIU, whether it's happening on a small level, on a bigger level. I'm working on a project now, and the goal is it's a coming of age story that Jesse is going to direct. And as I'm writing it, I'm purposely putting in different characters that looks differently than what we normally see on TV, because I want those people to have opportunities in this industry. So I think I'm just willing to serve to whichever capacity. Every now and then someone tells me I'm going to run for office. They like literally tell me, you're going to run for office. And if that's, you know, if you guys are looking for a congressman here in Florida one day, I don't know, I may take you up on that. So I'm not, you know, I don't know exactly, but I know that whatever I end up doing is to serve the greater good. Thank you. Thank you. Can't wait.
Hi,
Hi, how are you? What's your name?
my name is Guy Stokes, and I actually had my first year experience class in the summer term, and I just want to say thank you for writing your book, because it really changed my perspective and made me realize that no matter what background you come from,
Right.
you can actually get out of that, and you can be essentially who you want to be, that you
Right.
can rise up,
Right.
and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah.
I messaged you actually in the summer, sometime in the summer,
Right.
the moment after I finished the book,
Right.
and I was just I need to talk to this guy somehow.
You
And
need
so
to
I
see if
happened
I
to
was
find
real,
you on
huh?
Instagram.
Yeah.
And
Do you follow me on Instagram?
I do follow you
Do
on
I
Instagram.
piss you off sometime?
Not really.
That means a little bit. It's all right. We'll talk about it. Thank you.
But again, I really appreciate it. And,
Yeah.
I didn't even think you were going to respond, but just a couple hours later, you were really friendly and everything. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I wish the best for you. And
Thank
I'm glad
you
it's
so
working
much.
out for you.
That means the world to me. And, I don't take these moments for granted. So I've right back to every single person who wrote to me. I understand that I'm very fortunate and lucky. And the goal is to have this kind of interaction, is to reach someone like yourself. So thank you, man. I really appreciate you.
No problem. So my question is,
Yeah.
how did this book happen to get in the hands of our university, and what did you do to kind of promote it, or in a sense make it recognized here?
Right.
That's what I'm wondering about.
Okay. It's a technical question. I got you. So HarperCollins, who published this book, they're the publisher. Every year they choose one book out of hundreds of books they've published to send to their academic department in particular. And so this year, the book they chose, last year's the book they chose for this upcoming semester, whatever, this year, was my book, which is truly an honor. So what they did is that they'll send me to a conference, NODA, and there are other conferences. There are a few more I'm going to. And then I get on the stage, and there are hundreds of representatives from universities. FIU was there also. And then I go on the stage, and I talk about the book, and I present it to the decision makers. And I tell them if they don't pick it, then we're going to have problems. I'm kidding. So, I presented it to them, and then I think someone at FIU recognized the book and thought that it would be useful for this freshman class coming in, and so that's kind of how it happened.
All right.
It's like behind the scene, publishers and writing to FIU and saying, hey, we have this book. We think it's very helpful for students because of this guy's journey. What do you think about assigning it to your students? And kind of, right?
Yeah, but publishers send out brochures
Yep.
of books that they are promoting. And so Jim was in there and we saw it. And then we did have some colleagues who went to NODA and
Right.
checked them out.
See if he's real. Right. Yeah. Yep. And what's interesting is an interesting story is the two runners up for your school was my book and Incarceration Nation, which is written by a very close friend of mine. And so she called me, she said, you something, you beat me. I said, sorry. So, yeah, that's how it got here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wondering, because
Yes.
if that didn't ever happen, I would have not found out about your story. So.
100% right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's a question that, I wouldn't know this myself if I wasn't an author now.
Thank
Yeah.
you again. I appreciate
Thank you,
it.
man. Appreciate you.
Your last question, and then we'll sign it.
Okay.
Oh, and I'm very lucky.
Perfect. Yes.
My name is Mariceli. Hi.
Hi. Did you
Me? What?
send me a message?
I did not.
Okay.
But like Gabriela, I also teach the freshman experience course, and it's great that a lot of students have reached out to you to thank you for your story and how it touched them. But I'm talking more about now the students who don't understand your story and maybe
Right.
feel like they don't relate to it at all. We
Yep.
see that a lot in the classroom where, we're asking them to read this book and to write an essay about it and to reflect on it. And do you have any advice for us when we're teaching the book to your story is more than just the face value of your experience, in the hood and through the system and where you're at now. It goes beyond that. Do you have any advice for us when we're relating the story to our students?
Of course. Actually, in many ways, those students I'm deeply interested in talking to. Because I think that those students probably need the book the most. And what I mean by that is that earlier I talked about one of the problems I think we have in this country is that we don't understand each other enough. The truth is that there's two Americas. And, sometimes many of us come from another America, we don't really understand the other. But it doesn't mean that America, it's not real. So I think those youngsters should have the freedom to perhaps criticize the book, right? I think we should give them liberty to do more with that book than perhaps the students who can relate, right? Hey, if you can't relate to the story, or if you don't think the story is meaningful, can you tell us why is that? And I think if that happens, then there is room for dialogue, there's room for discussion. And I also think that a lot of students eventually at some point will be exposed to a different world, and they'll probably get it, right? So for example, myself, 10 years ago, there are people there are things if you'd asked me about them, I would not be interested in them because I didn't know anything about them. I give you another personal example. I, for the first time recently, invested in the stock market, right? Growing up, I didn't know anything about the stock market. I didn't know what stocks and bonds, mutual funds, none of these things. That was a foreign world to me. Now I have friends who are in that world. They in the hedge fund world, in the finance world. And so I'm starting to learn about that world myself, and I'm starting to learn about its purpose in our economy. I'm starting to follow the news about the stock market. 10 years ago, if the stock market, anything happened to it, I'm like, doesn't matter. I don't have anything to do with that. But in a way, it still affects all of us and who I am. So I think for some of the students who can't relate to the story, it's the same thing for them. I think you give them the free range to criticize it. Because in there's an immigrant story. There's a story of a young boy. There's a story of mentors. There's a story of parents. There's a story of the system. And then there's education. So I think there's a lot in there for students to really play with if they're really interested. And I think that college, for me, that's the purpose of college, is not to tell scholars how to think or what to think, but it's to help them to be critical. So I think if you break the story down and find different things in it and ask them to criticize that thing, and ask them why they criticize the thing, and I think eventually sometimes there's a spark there. It may not happen in your classroom. It may happen later on in life. I like to say that as teachers, mentors, or people doing this work, we're like farmers. And so you may plant a seed and you may water the seed. It doesn't mean that you get to see the seed actually grow and become a crop. But it doesn't mean that the seed is not growing or it's not going to become a commodity at some point. So I think that, that the job is to at least plant the seed. And maybe that young person eventually at some point in life will come in contact with something that remind them of that story. Last example is, I have a lot of friends who've been impacted by the opioid epidemic. Crack cocaine has ravished the black and brown community forever. But white America viewed it as, that's them, that's their problem, not ours. Let's give them more law enforcement. 3 strikes out, it was just more policing, more policing, more policing. Now with the opioid addiction, all of a sudden now is a community health issue, which I believe that it is. It should be. I want for those kids the same leniency, the same consideration that I wanted for the people who are struggling with crack addiction in my neighborhood. So I have a lot of friends who the first time coming in contact with that world is through going sort of like through the opioid addiction. And all of a sudden, some things make sense to them. But 5 years prior to them being caught up in that world, this world did not make any sense to them at all. So sometimes I'm saying that to say we don't get there until we have certain experiences, but it doesn't mean that we won't get there. So I think you should be patient with them, and you should give them my email. Tell them to email me. I'd be more than happy to challenge them in any way possible. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.